Good evening, everyone. Welcome to fifth live session for the course Usability Engineering. My name is Neelarnab Dutta, and I am a PMRF fellow from the Department of Design, IIT Guwahati. So, in this particular lecture, I will be covering key concepts from week 5 lecture videos, and I will be helping you solving the assignments for week 5. Since the nature of the assignments are objectives, so this session will be a bit more like a doubt clearing session. So please feel free to interact with me during the session. So you can interact with me using the mic, or you can also chat with me using the message box. Okay, so let's try to recall what we learned in our previous class. So in the last class, we talked about the user study process and one of the user study technique, which was contextual inquiry. So we discussed about how at the beginning of a user study process, we do user segmentation. So basically by user segmentation, by segmenting various users, we try to make sure specific user fall under specific categories. So this help us to formulate our questions, to formulate our queries, because the requirements or the context specific issues the users face may be different to different user profiles. That's the reason why instead of going for a user study to a heterogeneous group, we go for a user study where we have segmented groups which are homogeneous in nature. Okay, so very first thing we do is user segmentation, then we do is stakeholder analysis. So the stakeholder analysis process means we try to evaluate and map what level of engagement we need to do with specific stakeholders in a particular design project. So depending upon the stakeholders' interest and their power to impact a design project, we divide stakeholders into 4 groups. Okay, so this is represented by a coordinate system where we have 4 quadrants. And this particular matrix is called Mendelow's matrix, where we need to manage closely those stakeholders which have high interest and high power. Similarly, there are stakeholders like government system, or in a case of medical problem, probably a hospital authority will be such stakeholder who have low interest at the initial level in a project but have high power to give a direction to your project. So you need to keep those people satisfied. And then you have the other stakeholders who have high interest but have low power. So maybe those people will be useful in your project, in your design projects, getting useful information and in getting helping hand from these stakeholders. And the last group is the one which have the low power, the lowest power and lowest interest, and these are someone who are not directly involved to your design objectives or interests. However, you need to monitor these stakeholders in order to check if they sometime in future fall into these other categories. Okay, so that's what about stakeholder analysis. So after the first 2 tasks, we choose to do user study. Now there are various user study techniques. So in our last class, we discussed about contextual inquiry. So contextual inquiry is a technique where we visit the workplace and see the work uh, which unfolds in a natural way. That means we do not disturb the user, we do not disturb the natural way the work happens, and we try to understand what activities, what workflow the user carry, and what are the issues the user face in their day-to-day life activities. Okay, so these are four key criterias or key characteristics that we need to consider in a contextual inquiry process. So first thing is context. That means we as a designer go to the workplace and see the work, and that means we do not bring the user and we do not try to create a unnaturalistic scenario to make the work happen. So we go to the actual context and then we observe it as it is. Second thing is partnership. We try to build a particular relationship depending upon the requirement in order to make yourself and the user collaborate in his activities. Okay, so this is in this particular characteristics we consider particular relationship model. That means what sort of relationship you try to uh, you know you try to make with the particular user, whether it is like a equal level stakeholders, for example user level stakeholder, so you can introduce to that particular person as another user, or you can be like a student teacher relationship, so you uh, give the user the status of a teacher and you become the student and try to see how this particular person perform a particular task. Similarly, in a context like a hospital scenario where you try to monitor a patient pain points, probably you will be behaving like a doctor patient relationship. Okay, so in that case probably you will behave as a doctor, and probably you will treat the patient in a way so that the patient reveal all sort of pain points to you. Okay, so these relationship models you need to consider when you develop a relationship with the user in a contextual inquiry process. The third aspect is interpretation. So when you do a contextual inquiry, the nature of the information can be varying. It can be your videos, it can be notes, it can be just text. Okay, so you need to give a meaning to the data so that these data can be converted into some knowledgeable information. So you need to give specific context to the data you have collected in a contextual inquiry process. The fourth aspect is focus. That means during a contextual inquiry, you need to always keep your focus on your inquiry. So do not try to deviate a particular inquiry from its objectives. So keep the the user engaged in his work. Do not try to influence the outcome of the inquiry. Rather, try to control uh, the specific inquiry process the way it should be, so that you gather information based on your objectives. So that is what focus defines. Okay, so now in a contextual inquiry you may collect various kind of data. Those can be video data, images, can be recording, audio recordings, can be your notes, but there should be some way how these informations needs to be recorded for future and future study and in a useful way. So for that what we do, we model the information of contextual inquiry using five modeling techniques. So there are five models that we discussed in our last class, which are flow model, sequence model, cultural model, artifacts model, and physical model. So these are basically specific mind maps. These are all our mind maps representing specific information. So flow model describes activities, communication, then your communication, and then your actions, then stakeholders. Okay, similarly sequence model defines a particular task of a flow model. So if a flow model have a lot of uh, activities like this, so these are activity 1 to activity 2 transition, a sequence model give a detailed information about what are the sub steps in a particular activity. Similarly, there are cultural models that define how two stakeholder influence each other in particular decision making. Then artifacts model defines all sort of probes on artifacts, equipments, tools that are part of a system in which helps in a particular way in doing particular activities. Then physical model represent the physical space of, this is more like the design, the interior design or architecture of a workspace. So how the flow of people, user, stakeholder happens, where things uh, you know, happens in a particular way. So this represent more like a pictorial representation of the workspace. So now what we need to do as a output of a contextual inquiry is first to model these mind maps from the data we gathered, and then we need to look for those shortfalls or those breakpoints where you find some issues. So breakpoints in a particular process are represented by fireball or light bulb, and these are the region or the opportunity areas where we can actually design around uh, and come up with a better design. Okay. Okay, so this is what we discussed in the last class, and in today's class I'll be discussing some more user study techniques. So these two phases are common. Phase one and phase two are common. That is user segmentation and stakeholder analysis. So whether you do other kind of user studies like focus group or interviews or three-cloud protocol, you need to do a user segmentation. Now user segmentation for three-cloud protocol probably can be like it can be based on novice user or expert user. Similarly, for a focus group, it is again based probably on the particular work profile or a particular user group that are expert in a particular practice. Okay, so these two tasks is common for all sort of user study. So we'll be discussing today the another type of user study technique, which is interviews. So we all know what is an interview. So interview is basically a face-to-face discussion or conversation where we used to have set of questions and we try to get answer for those questions from the user. Okay. So we have an interviewer and we have an interviewee. So this is the designer and this is the stakeholder whom or the participant whom we are interviewing. Okay, so interview technique we use when we do not look for sample size. That means we do not try to go for a large, large validation of data in terms of numbers, but we want to get information in terms of valuable information, insights which are attitudinal in nature. Okay, so difference between interview and probably something like this is the the contextual inquiry is that here it is attitudinal. That means the information we get is based on someone's past memories or someone's belief or attitude over a context. So this is something different from a contextual inquiry, because contextual inquiry is something what you as a designer see from a context of use from user. So We cannot rely very much on the interview data. However, these are useful information when we need sometimes expert opinion or information from someone who is a stakeholder, but it is not possible to see the breakpoints from a live observation. Okay. So there are three types of interview techniques. So very common is the unstructured interview. So generally, when we go for a contextual inquiry, we often encounter these kind of interview processes. So we're after looking certain scenarios, certain workflow, we we have some inquiries, and then we ask the user at the same time when while doing a particular task. So these sort of interviews are called unstructured interviews. So those are useful when you try to get general information on a particular topic. Sometimes they give in-depth information. However, um, since a particular inquiry process is time bound in nature, a unstructured interview sometimes may go or it may deviate from a particular context of interest. So often in a interview process where we want to get specific information, and that happens only when we get to know all sort of information from a contextual inquiry. So these initial set of unstructured interviews probably give a clue for conducting a more detailed structured interview or a semi-structured interview. Okay. So semi-structured interview is another type of interview where we interview experts or stakeholders with some prefixed set of questions. However, it is semi-structured in nature. That means the scope of question can extend beyond what we pre-decided uh, at the time of interviewing. So topics can expand and we explore new ideas while we are interviewing via semi-structured interview. So these are helpful when we try to collect informations about someone's attitude, or we collect information about certain facts and opinions. So when you ask, for example, when you ask a doctor about a particular uh, patient condition, then probably the patient or probably the doctor will give you a specific answer, which probably again give rise to a new question in your mind. And that particular question may not be pre-decided for you. So you ask a follow-up question to know further in that particular line of thought. So this happens generally in a semi-structured interview. So you started an interview with a specific goal or objectives in mind. You formulate a set of questions based on your objectives. However, when you go for a interview process, the information that the stakeholder or the expert give it to you, that may leads to rise of new questions, and which you use to question again the interview, and you uh, get to know more details about facts and opinions. Okay. The third kind of interview technique is structured interview. So structured interview is more like a verbal questionnaire. Basically, we have a fixed set of questions, and generally these are useful when we try to collect information on demographics or specific behavioral relationships. Okay. For example, you can go to a labor association, okay, and then you meet all the workers there and ask them about their age. So everyone will give certain answer which will be numeric in nature. Then you collect those, and then you ask about how they are connected with the association. Okay. Similarly, you try to understand from them what are the issues they face in using a particular particular while you doing a particular activity, or while doing while using particular system. So these set of questions can be prefixed, and you are bounded by your questions, and your scope is defined only to understand the answers to this set of questions. And generally in such structured interview, we look for a relatively higher number of interviews compared to semi-structured interview, because here we also look for sample size. In order to prove or validate certain hypotheses. So mostly structured interviews are hypothesis based, and the kind of inquiries are also very objective and sometimes quantitative in nature. However, semi-structured interviews are mostly qualitative. Each interview took place in a different way, though we start with the similar set of questions at the beginning, but the interview flow can go differently based on the way the interviewee responds the questions that you have formulated previously. However, unstructured interview are not very useful, but they give rise to uh, further set of uh, inquiries which you can use for conducting semi-structured interview and structured interviews. Okay, so clear? Okay. So next important technique is critical incident technique. So critical incident technique is a method of uh, interviewing or collecting information from a stakeholder user, where we ask the user to recall and describe a time when a particular behavior, action, or occurrence impacted a particular task outcome. So that means we are looking for those events in a timeline where there was a significant positive or negative outcome. For example, uh, when you ask a particular user about a particular tool, for example, a general interview question can be like, tell me about a time where you used a tool in your job. Okay? So this is like a question which is to a user, and he needs to uh, give a information about any tool that he used in his job. So the nature of the question is so generic that the nature of the answer will be also very generic. So since we, as per the theory of remembering self, so in the last class we discussed about the theory of remembering self. Many times we only remember our the bad or extreme conditions only, and we uh, always forget small details of events or activities from our long-term memory. Okay, so the difference between a contextual inquiry, where we actually see a particular incident happen in real time, the problem with interviews is that in an interview often those intricate details are missed. However, interviews are more convenient, and also there's a need for certain technique so that a user can give you those informations which give you detail about a particular task or actions. So in order to do that, we ask the interviewees a question in such a way that they they can go back in their memories to particular time period and actually can give you a elaborative answer of their experience of particular time. So for example, look at these three questions. The first question is, tell me about a time where you used the tool in your job. So that means we are talking about particular tool. For example, the tool can be, let's see, a software tool. Let's see, it's a small mobile application for example, a calculator tool. Okay. Now we are asking that particular person that tell me about a time where you used a calculator in your job. So there are a lot of incidences where the person have used the calculator. So he may give you any information like, okay, I generally use, he can give answer like, I use calculator in most of the time, and often I use it for my maths class, or I do accounting jobs. That's why I use calculator very much in our daily life. Okay. So those kind of generic answer they can give. Okay. Now, if you change the question to a bit more specific, like tell me about the last time you used the tool in your job. Now, the question will give allow a user to give an answer which is like the last time you used the tool. That means he will remember the last time when he used the calculator. So he may give an answer like, yesterday I used, or in last month I used the calculator. But see this particular question, tell me about a particular time when you used the tool in your job where it helped you to be effective in your work. That means here the question is asked in such a way that the user have to remember a particular time where the calculator is found to be or proved to be more effective in his work. So then probably he will give a critical incident. He will remember a critical incident in his past, and he will probably give an answer which is more valuable to you. For example, in a critical incident technique, when you ask these sort of questions, often a interviewee's response include a very positive or very negative experience. That means he will either talk about incidents where the calculator helped him a lot. Probably that is a deadline, and his calculator failed suddenly, but at the last moment his calculator worked, and he probably could finish his accounting job. So probably that is the most uh, important information that you can collect to understand that particular incident. Similarly, you can ask the question in a negative way, that tell me a particular time when you use this particular tool and this thing does not work. Okay, so in this particular question, then probably the user will give an answer which will be a bad experience for him, and he will tell you that, and on that particular day I was doing that and the calculator did not work, or that particular functionality in the calculator did not work. Okay. So these techniques, the critical incidence techniques, are helpful in pinpointing a conversation to a time where you have a extreme experience, either positive or negative, and you want to get to know about the story or a description about the scenario where a particular task or workflow get hampered. Okay, so this is a technique, and these can be used for both structured, semi-structured, as well as unstructured interviews. Okay, clear? Okay. The another type of user study is focus group. So focus group is more like a group discussion where you bring uh, a small group of stakeholders close and close inside a group, and you became a moderator and to discuss certain topic areas, and you try to get opinions from the stakeholders on particular subject area. This generally you do as a follow-up study after your contextual inquiry. So after your contextual inquiry, when you get to know about the raw information from your field study, then you next thing you conduct interviews, which are probably interviews with individual people. Now you have individual opinions about a particular context or scenario. Then you conduct focus group. This is more like a group study where we discuss a particular subject or topic among the stakeholders, and we try to get the opinions, a collective opinion on a particular topic area. For example, uh, if we visit a hospital and we see a particular disease condition, okay, so if there is a patient and we see two three patients, we observe in a contextual inquiry, we see similar disease condition, then probably we get to know only the requirements or the problems that from the perspective of a patient. Okay, so we get the requirements or the problems from patient perspective. Okay, now patient perspective, although they are the end user and they are the sufferers in a particular scenario, however we cannot design around only based on their requirements, because they probably may not know the clinical information or clinical cause of that particular disease state. That's why next thing you need to do after contextual inquiry is interviews. Now when you do interviews, you meet probably doctors, so you have one-on-one discussion with different user profiles and different stakeholders, clinician, hospital authorities, and then you try to understand why that particular clinical condition happened or what are the solution and how this can be treated. All those information you collect via a semi-structured or structured interview, and then you do a focus group discussion where you bring various stakeholders into picture, and then you try to discuss the subject matter to get a collective opinion about a topic. What happens in an interview is that when interviewer or interviewee give you a particular information, if that topic is alien to you, you do not have to say anything. You cannot say whether it is a truth or it's a false statement. Similarly, there may be different viewpoints when you take individual interviews. However, when you discuss a topic in a group, the individual differences about opinions cancel out because of a debate or because of logical reasoning, and you get to know information that are collectively agreed upon by all the stakeholders. Okay, so that's the main reason why we do focus group. Now there are different type of focus group. One is exploratory type of focus group where it is similar to this example. We try to understand a general attitude over a particular product, service, or problem. Okay, so this is like getting a general information from various stakeholders about a subject, about a particular issue, problem. Okay, and to get to uh, have some conclusive idea on what is the perspective. Another type of focus group study is feature prioritization. That means when we have uh, when we no, where when we are in a phase where we need to fix features for whether it's a particular product features or organizational features, we discussed a topic on among a set of stakeholders who are the users or the use stakeholders of this particular tool, and then they provide inputs on priorities of various features. Okay, so this is useful when uh, you have set of ideas, and you try to discuss these ideas among a set of stakeholders to get their collective opinion on the features that need to be included in your product, or that needs to be useful to solve the particular scenario for the user. Another type of focus group study is competitive analysis, where we try to discuss with appropriate stakeholders about the value proposition of competitive products, and also we try to discuss like how we can improve upon our product by providing new value proposition. So this is more like competitive analysis via group discussion. The fourth category is trend explanation. So this is similar to your attitude, the understanding attitude. However, this is more to understand user or consumer behavior for a particular product. Okay, so this is whenever some products uh, goes high on sales and some products fall their sales. So you need to understand these trends, like why certain products fail, certain products go up, and what should be your strategy to move up in a market. So those things you discussed using a focus group. Okay, so here we consider market experts, the entrepreneurs, the people who are engaged in economy. So you bring various experts profile into picture and try to get all those informations. Okay, so basically these techniques like interviews, contextual inquiry, and focus group have their individual spaces in a user study, and they are useful for specific use case scenario. Another type of user study is questionnaire. Now questionnaire you use when you need to know a more detailed information which are mostly objective and fixed, okay, for a particular context. And in a questionnaire study we look for high sample size, mostly because you try to validate certain hypotheses based on your findings. So here are some examples, like what uh, exactly you try to identify from a questionnaire. For example, you try to identify the attitude of people. So that means the people's opinion on particular aspects. So you may ask a particular question like, okay, give a rating. What do you think? How beautiful is this particular product? Okay, you can give a scale 1 to 5, and people will give, okay, my rating is 4, this is 4, someone will give 5. So you can ask people's opinion about a particular product. Similarly, you may also look for qualitative answers like needs. So you may ask simple questions like, okay, what do you think this product is missing? Okay, by showing some picture you can ask the simple question like, what do you think this particular product is missing? So people will give you some qualitative answer. Okay, probably answer can be like, the color is not right, or the product is not looking aesthetics. So all those information they will provide. So you will have a set of qualitative information. However, the boundary of the informations are limited by the question. Similarly, you can know about behavior of people. You can know about demographic information like age, education profile, income level, etc., and other concepts also you can include. So basically, questionnaire is a questionnaire technique is used generally in a survey method. It is not something done in a real time or at one-to-one basis. It is more like a survey which is floated across a broad population, and at least you need to maintain some specific sample size in order to verify your hypothesis, and you need to formulate a set of fixed predefined questions, and you need to verify the questions for their reliability and validity. So these are some set of example questions that will give you an idea how a questionnaire is developed. So first of all, it can have questions which are like aided recall. That means you provide some sort of clue to the to the user for the response. So you provide information. For example, you say a question like, you have pictures and you give five characteristics. Now ask them which particular picture represent which particular characteristics. Now, since you have given the options, that means this is a way how a particular user can recognize or recall a particular characteristics. So you did not ask a open-ended question like what are the characteristics of these particular pictures, but you gave options and let the users recall this information in order to make his choices. Similarly, equations can be like ranking or rating questions. For example, did you like the design, or was it easy to navigate the interface? Okay, so you can give a scale here and let the person give a rating, how easy it was to navigate or how easy it was to identify certain feature. Similarly, you can also measure the attitude of people via a multi-item scale. So where you have a scale having two extreme levels, either strongly positive or strongly negative, and then you have intermediate level. So you have a neutral level, you have very positive level one and negative level, and then you have subtle negative and subtle positive. And now you ask a set of questions which are multiple questions, and you have the multiple scales to date these questions. For example, my manager considers my feeling, so you say agree. Okay, my well-being is a priority for my manager, so you say strongly agree. So my manager defends me from unfair criticism, you say neutral. That means you don't know, those incidents did not come yet. Okay, so this is how you use a multi-item scale kind of questions. Similarly, there are balance questions where you ask a question that does not have any polarity. That means you can give the user can give an answer from both sides. So you can ask a question like, tell me your experience in using this interface. Okay, that means now the user will give an answer which will be balanced in nature. So your question is in such a way, you have asked the question in such a way that it will generate the information which may be either positive experience or negative experience. Okay, so this is a balanced question. Then there are bipolar scales which have, it's like two extreme endpoints. positive and negative, and then you have various levels. So this can be like neutral, then you have one scale up, one scale up, three scale up, then negative, much more negative and very negative. So these things you can ask. So in a bipolar scale you can determine like what should be the number of scales. So you can define whether it's a 5-point scale or 7-point scale. So basically we have a neutral value at the middle, and then you can decide the levels of positive and levels of negative. So you can, instead of 3 you could have -2 and +2, or you can have -1 or +1. Okay, so depending upon your requirement, so you formulate these scales. And bogus question is something when what happens sometimes when you give a particular user to fill a questionnaire, many times a user may feel like not answering the questions by giving a full concentration by reading the questions. Instead he just try to fill the information with some random information, and you can find out such users by asking intermediate bogus questions. So you can ask some questions that are not relevant, and where it is intended the user will make some uh, error. However, if user give you a correct answer, or he did not answer that particular question, or if he give a answer which is which which makes which leads to the conclusion that he did not actually read the question itself, that means you cannot use his questionnaire results or response to analyze the data. So sometimes you use these tricks. So in a questionnaire of probably 50 questions, you put 4 to 5 bogus questions, and then you try to see whether the user give response to those questions or not. For example, if you have a checklist kind of question and the user give answer like always 4 4 4 4 4, now in the middle there's a question which does not have any rating. For example, the question is like, how are you? Now he cannot rate a question like how are you, so this is a bogus question. Now if he rate here like, okay, this is like rating 4, that means he did not read the questions, and probably the answers to the other questions are also not reliable. So to check the respondent's reliability, we use bogus questions. Then there are double barrel questions where we ask the question in such a way that the respondent gave both the positive as well as negative side of the context. For example, if you ask, do you agree or disagree with the statement? Managers in my organizations are helpful, but the lack of diversity in the organization is disappointing. So some users will respond to this particular side. Some will give response to this particular side. So some will be disagreeing with the statement, some will be agreeing, and they will also give their opinions why they disagree and why they don't disagree. So these are the questions when you want to know how many people are actually on the agreement side and how many people are on the disagreement side. Then Likert scale is again this sort of scale where we have extreme positive and extreme negative. So here we see a 6-point Likert scale. So we define a scale having extremities and a central neutral point, and these all depends upon particular questions, a particular inquiry, and these are again part of bipolar questions. Like bipolar scale, this is again a bipolar questions when we have some values which are positive and some are negative. So Now, Likert scale is defined from the perspective of what we used as a label for our scale. For example, here the labels are strongly agree, disagree. However, here the scale is extremely dissatisfied, extremely satisfied. So Likert scale define, like, for a particular context, what should be the scale, what should be the level, and what should be the, how many points should be there in the scale. Okay. Okay. So I think that much is clear with the questionnaire study. Okay. So questionnaire study is more done for user survey, and this involves online surveys as well as physical surveys. However, sample size is important here. Probably for a particular inquiry or particular understanding of requirements, you do over 200, 300 questionnaire inquiries. Okay. Okay. Now next is task analysis. Now from here, the kind of user studies are a bit different than the initial user studies. Now here we are trying to get information on particular system specification or ideas. So what happened when we studied the design thinking process or user-centric design process? We have the initial the empathy phase, right? Then define phase, then we have ideate, then we have prototype, right? Then we evaluate. Now what happens? We do user study at both the initial phase, which is about understanding a particular requirements and problem, and also at this phase, which is equivalent to user testing, system testing, where instead of identifying the system level requirements or verifying system level requirements, we try to understand by going back, like, how the user interact with a particular product, and what are the various usability issues or various interaction issues they face while using that particular product. So what sort of uh, processes or tasks they need to follow, can they recognize specific task or flow of activities for that particular concept, and what sort of cognitive processing they need to do. So in order to check all those details, we do something called task analysis. So it is about learning by observing user in their actions in doing certain tasks to achieve some intended goals. Okay. Now, task analysis can be done in a field study also. So, during a contextual inquiry, when you see a particular user using a competitive product, that time also you can ask a particular user to perform particular task, and you try to understand how he is doing a particular activity. So it describes, the task analysis process describe the physical tasks, the kind of task as well as the sequence of tasks, and also the cognitive planning that the particular person or the user has to process uh, inside him while doing that particular activities or task. Okay. So what we have in a task analysis is a particular goal, and then we have a set of tasks. So corresponding to each goal, we used to have a set of tasks in order to accomplish that particular goal. Okay. So task analysis involve a single user study, okay, where we try to see or observe how a particular user achieve a particular goal by following the series of tasks, what sort of task he is following. For example, if you ask a user Okay, buy buy a cloth in Amazon. Okay, now buy a cloth buy buy a cloth in Amazon app is the objective. Now, in order to achieve that objectives, the set of tasks he will do. For example, he will use a smartphone, then he will open a particular uh, web browser or particular app. In this case, it will be Amazon app, and then he will go to the search bar and type this particular uh, cloth type, and then he will proceed to buy, and then he will do the payment at the end, and that will end the particular task. So in a task analysis, we try to understand what are the starting and the end of a particular set of tasks in order to achieve a particular objective. So our goal as a designer is to understand the set of tasks, their sequence, their flow in order to achieve a particular objective. Now, do not get confused with task analysis with other similar terms like workflow analysis or job analysis. So difference between these are that a job analysis is something when we try to analyze what a particular user or particular employee do in a organization over a period of time. Okay, for example, it discuss about the job profile or activities of a employee uh, when you study him for a definitive period of time. For example, Monday, this particular person, if he's a designer, probably Monday he work on concept design. Tuesday he go to field study. Now Wednesday he probably brainstorm ideas, and Thursday probably he joined VP meeting. Then Friday probably he do client meeting. Now see, the set of activities are very broad. Now these activities are more like describing his daily activities, and this is what we describe in a job analysis. Okay. Now workflow analysis is something about cooperation between different stakeholders. So this explains how a particular task is done collectively uh, within a stakeholders. So for example, if this particular thing, field study, if you want to understand field study as workflow analysis, then probably there are designer involved, then there is a team leader involved, then probably the end user involved. Now what happens here, what we try to understand is like, as a designer he observe, so what are these activities among these stakeholders and how they are related to each other. So designer job is to observe the uh, end user in action, then end user job is to demonstrate his issues. Okay, similarly, uh, designer job is to give information to his team leader, then team leader may also direct the user to give that sort of information. So this define how activities to take place among the stakeholders as a workflow. Okay, so workflow analysis and job analysis are different than task analysis. In task analysis we have a fixed goal. That goal is, the goal has a starting point as a in and a end point. So that's why it has a definite set of tasks to be accomplished, and these are detailed in a way. Okay, so the difference is like this. So when we are trying to buy a cloth using a mobile app, so we have a fixed starting point and fixed end point, and our we have only one particular objective, and we have fixed set of tasks in order to achieve that particular goal. And this is what we try to analyze when we try to understand a particular system in practice. Okay, so there are two types of task analysis. One is cognitive task analysis. So cognitive task analysis is about understanding the the information that a user perform in decision making, problem solving, and in judgment and attention. And these are more happens inside his brain. So and it is very difficult to recognize this visually or by observing. So there are techniques like think aloud protocol which we use generally to understand cognitive tasks. And another way how we can understand cognitive tasks, but which is not very effective, is by visually observing for markers or for expressions that sometimes user give when he have extreme satisfaction or extreme dissatisfaction. Okay, so but understanding specific cognitive processes like um, how a user decide particular set of tasks, and or how he um, plan and evaluate finally a set of activities to perform is difficult just by observing these extreme conditions. Okay, so for that we need other techniques. The other type of task analysis is hierarchical task analysis. So this is possible where we try to decompose high level tasks into subtasks. Okay. So here I'll be giving an example like how uh, hierarchical task analysis is done. Okay. So very first thing is that whenever you try to understand like how a particular person, for example here, a particular person want to book movie ticket. Okay, so he tried to book a movie ticket. Now his goal is to book movie ticket. So you will have a central goal. This is book movie ticket. Okay, and then you will have set of activities. For example, very first set of activities probably will be for example, open book my show. Then the next set of activities is search for this thing movie, search for movie, and then select movie, and then book ticket. Now these are the four tasks that a user has to perform in order to book a ticket. Now in task analysis, the very first thing we need to do is we need to watch, or we need to observe a particular task, whether via contextual inquiry or via interviewing technique. We need to know about how a particular objective needs to be accomplished by a user. Okay, so we can use contextual inquiry techniques as well as interview techniques or other techniques also to understand how a particular objective can be reached by using different tasks. Next, we analyze these tasks in great detail, and we break down these individual tasks into subtasks. So subtask means now you are trying to break down the task into great detail. For example, opening the book my show. Before opening, probably you need to switch on your mobile. then you look for the book my show icon, then you open, okay, and then you look for the search bar. Now searching may be involve uh, you clicking on the search bar, then typing the movie name, or you select particular genre. If you do not know the movie name, probably you need to use filters, so you can use different filters. Then you select a movie. For selecting movie, probably you go to particular time, particular day, select a particular day, particular movie theater, then particular seat number, and then you go to booking. Now for booking, you need to go through the entire process of filling the information about account or credit card details or Google Pay, and then you make the particular payment. So this detailed breakdown task into subtasks and analyzing the task at a great detail level is what is the outcome of a task analysis procedure. Okay, so this is how it's a visual representation how hierarchical task analysis is done. Okay, another type of user study technique is walkthroughs. Now, walkthroughs are a bit similar to task analysis. However, this is uh, done not for individual user. So, task analysis is you give a goal and you ask individual user to decide upon particular flow of task, and then you break after observing or inquiring you then break down the task into smaller subtasks. However, a walkthrough is not a techniques to design or plan a set of tasks, other than you have a design and you try to evaluate the design whether a particular user group is able to recognize your design or not. So you try to see whether the mental model of the user matches with your conceptual model. So what we do here is like you give a task. So there are two type of walkthroughs. One is pluralistic walkthroughs. So pluralistic walkthrough means there are more than one user group or more than one group of people involved in the study. So generally in pluralistic walkthroughs, you have the end user. So you have end user group. So probably 5 to 6 end user group. Then you have usability experts. Again another 5 to 6. Then you have the programmers. Okay, 5 to 6. Now, when you have a design ready with some level of initial specification and you try to validate them, you try to validate those specification or those interactions, the way you provided those interactions, you want to validate or evaluate those among various stakeholders. So you give your design to the set of groups and give them a particular task. So you here you give a definitive a definite task for user testing. Now for the particular task you have a set of storyboards. Okay, so storyboards are like the subtask, this particular subtask or series of sequence of subtasks for a particular task. For example, if you ask someone to search for a movie, okay, now the task is now limited. So previously we used to have search or open application then search then book, okay, or select, right? So now let's say we give this particular task select. Now you have designed a unique way or new features, a new way of interaction, how the user can select particular movie type. For example, instead of um, going to different pages, you provide them with some new interface where at one go a particular movie, the time, the theater hall, as well as sittings can be selected by user. Okay, so this is a new interface that you want to evaluate among the users. Okay, so this is the initial specification, and you want to see how your design can be interpreted by the users. So you have certain buttons or features which you want that those are some things that is pressable, something like a checkbox, and you want to check whether the user can recognize those features or not. So you first give a task and then you define the particular storyboard. So for example, in a select movie selecting process, the very first task is provide registration. So for example, provide details about the people. Okay, so how many people will be there and what are their names, so that you get a ticket against a particular person's name. So you first need to do registration. Then probably next task will be checkout, hall selection, etc. So first thing is you select a particular task and then you have a particular set of storyboards, and then you give the first storyboard to each person in the group. So this is how we do walkthroughs. Basically here we break down tasks to individual small stories or subtasks, and we validate or evaluate these individual tasks, and then slowly we move ahead to analyze the overall task. So the users are asked to perform the task, and they were asked to write their flow their activities in a sheet of paper. So for example, when a user use that particular feature or window, his observations or his interpretation of this interface is like that: press the down arrow key twice to scroll the page, click this empty text box, type it in it, click this button next to the text box. So these are some random observations that the user realized after he goes through your design. So similarly, everyone among all these three user groups have their information. Okay, so once everyone have finished their task analysis, then they do a group discussion. Okay, so at the end of this group discussion, they try to analyze what should be the correct sequence of actions. Okay, so probably one person do this differently, one person do this the other way, one person get the most optimized path. So they do this discussion and they finally come to a conclusion on what should be the most optimistic way to arrive or to perform that particular set of storyboards or set of subtasks. So a pluralistic walkthrough allows you to understand the most efficient way of interaction in this particular case, and also try to give you information about possible uh, shortcuts and possible interaction issues which you can minimize in a design. Okay, so that is what is cognitive walkthroughs. Sorry, pluralistic walkthroughs, and this is what we do at the initial level of prototyping, where we make low fidelity prototypes. We try to specify the system specifications. So instead of developing a full-fledged prototype, we do cognitive walkthroughs and pluralistic walkthroughs, and we try to gather information about what should be the optimized way of uh, f- flow of task, uh, what should be the name of the labels, are those are recognizable, are the features are too small, are the features are too large, are the colors are correct. So all those information you can uh, gather via walkthrough studies without actually developing your final product. So this is more like a evaluation technique. The another type of walkthrough is cognitive walkthrough. So this is um to understand how a user perform a particular task, but instead of understanding what are the various activities, we try to understand where the particular where a user faces particular issue in his cognitive processing. So we try to uh, gather information on various usability issues while navigating through the interface. So there are three parts in a cognitive walkthrough process. First, we define a user goal. So we give a goal to the user. For example, here we say buy a hair dryer. Okay, so this is a goal. Now the tasks that needs to be performed also are given to the user. So for example, open a browser, navigate to the site, login button. So like that, we have set of activities, and those set of activities are given to him. But the users are not given information, the visual information about this particular website. Okay. Now the user is asked to follow these activities, perform this task, and you as a designer you try to observe and record the findings. Now what happens when you give this particular interface and give the user the set of tasks, predefined tasks, with a overall goal, the user first tried to see, open the browser. Okay, opening the browser was easy, then navigate the site. So he will navigate and look for the login button. So click the login button. So if login button is here, then it is easy to recognize. However, if login button is somewhere not here, then he will have difficulties in identifying where is the login button. Okay, sometimes probably you may not have the particular term login, instead it will have the term sign in. Okay, so those are the mental processes that you try to capture, whether the user have is having difficulty in navigating or in understanding the controls while performing the set of activities for the particular goal. So we ask some of such type of questions in a cognitive walkthrough process. So once we get the results as a visual information, videography, or our experience while looking at the particular set of user activities, we try to ask ourselves the questions: will the user try and achieve the right outcome? That means, is the user could reach the end of the tasks? That means, does he able to finish his task, or does he achieve his goal? Then will the user notice the correct actions? Okay, that means whether he could recognize the buttons. Okay, whether he could recognize what to do after reading this particular sentence. That means here is a information processing where the data or information needs to be converted by the user to understand that he needs to now look for some controls in order to do this. So that particular processing time can be evaluated by observing the user doing that particular task. Similarly, you can ask like whether the user associate correct action with the correct outcome. That means whether he is able to do a particular task efficiently, or he perform it differently, which is not the ideal way of reaching to the outcome. Okay. Then if the correct action is performed, will the user see the progress he made during the intended outcome? So this is again like, during the entire process, does the user get frustrated, or does he sees the progress he is making? So all these talk about the experience of the user while performing a set of tasks in order to achieve a particular goal. And you as a designer try to understand where does the particular person stuck or find difficulties in his cognitive process. Okay. And once you recognize those specific places where the person stuck, he may later ask or inquire about the user's mental process at that particular point of time. Okay, so this is again another technique. uh, Now next is think aloud protocol. Now think aloud protocol is a very useful tool when we try to understand cognitive uh, processes in a task flow study. Okay. So what happens in a walkthroughs, cognitive walkthroughs, the information is collected by the designer based on observation or visual recording. However, that may not be the actual representation of what's actually going inside the person's head. However, in Think Aloud protocol, we tried to understand how the user think, how the user processes the information by asking the user to speak loud when he performs a particular task. So think aloud protocol means speak while executing. That means if a particular person is using a particular interface or operating particular application, he or she needs to speak loud his thought processes. Now this is not easy, but this comes after some training uh, that let you understand how this works. Okay. So basically when you try to click, okay, so you speak like yourself, like you speak to yourself like, okay, I'm clicking a button which is blue in color. Now once it get open, then you speak to yourself, okay, but now the window opened up. Okay, I can see three buttons on the top, and then there is a small icon having a camera in the middle, and then we have three button on the below. Now this button on the left side is a picture button, so I think I need to press there. So this is how you talk while you use a particular application, or you where when you when you perform a particular activity. Now there are two kind of verbal reporting. So okay, in a think aloud protocol there are two type of verbal reporting. One is concurrent. That means think aloud protocol while performing a particular cognitive task. Generally we use this particular technique when the tasks have complexities in terms of cognitive processing, in terms of calculations, understanding, learnability. So in those cases we use think aloud protocol. So concurrent reporting is something when a user give information in real time while using or while performing a particular activity. Now retrospective reporting means participants are asked to recall their experience when they are, performing particular task. Okay, so this is after you completed your task. This is while you are performing your task. Okay, now both these informations are important, and in a think aloud protocol we require both of them. Now, here is the procedure how the data are collected. So first, you get appointment, or you ask particular subject to get a particular appointment or schedule a particular, interview or interaction session, and then you ask that particular person, and you give the brief about what is think aloud protocol. Okay, and then you give them an example of how to perform think aloud protocol. So generally you give an example from prior information which is not uh, similar to the context for which you are actually taking think aloud protocol. Now you ask that particular person to perform think aloud protocol. So you ask him to speak while he execute his task, and then you audio record his entire activities. Okay, so once he finished his task, you then use the audio records and transcribe into verbal reports. Okay, so this audio data is converted into textual data. Now, okay, now one more thing is like while the particular person uh, perform think aloud, so he while he's speaking aloud, sometimes uh, it is possible that a user forgot to speak loud. Okay, so in those cases you need to, as an investigator, quietly remind the user to think aloud, okay, to speak loud while performing the particular task. Okay, so apart from that, all sort of information, all sort of communication between the subject and investigator is limited, and we keep it minimum so that the user do not lose his mental flow of thoughts, and he does not get deviated from his thought process. That's why you need to give prior training to the user how to perform think aloud protocol. You give them an example, then once the experiment or the data collection process starts, you do not interact with the user unless the user stop talking, and in that cases you just ping the user quietly and remind him to speak loud when he do his activities. So the entire session is audio recorded, and later you do coding, you do thematic coding on the data. So I will give an example how thematic coding is done, and you convert that information, the pieces of transcripted data, into specific codes. So there are three types of codes: open coding, axial coding, and selective coding. And these coding process let you reveal the important findings of this particular user study. So in this user study of, for example, operating a particular, for example, booking that movie ticket while using Book My Show, if the user speak loud while he is performing the activities of selecting or booking the seats, uh, you will get detailed information how the particular make decisions, how the particular person choose or evaluate a particular set of activities, and what was his final actions. So all those information uh, you can collect using think aloud protocol. Now if there are issues that particular person face, then probably you will get some information from the transcript. Probably there will be occasional stoppage of his verbal communication. Probably he will give certain sound like oh, okay, I forgot, like that. So based on those verbal information, you can actually understand like user having difficulty here. And later, once you get those concurrent information, later you can collect retrospective information to understand more detail about those experiences, and all of those informations are converted as transcripts. Okay, so later when you code, you basically try to uh, capture key themes or key constructs from the transcripts and try to identify the issues uh, that particular system has, or particular navigational issue that particular application has. Okay, so that's about think aloud protocol. Okay, so let me give you an example how a think aloud protocol is done. Okay, so this is a small puzzle. Okay, now this is very similar to a navigational problem or a process or activity where the user needs to put his uh, memory or his mind too much in order to perform certain activities. So this is a mathematical puzzle. So this needs cognitive processing. So let me show you how uh, think aloud protocol can be done, can be conducted for this particular case. Okay, okay, let's start. Okay, so as a think aloud protocol, I will start speaking while I will be trying to solve this particular puzzle. So here what I see that, okay, it's a matrix, and 5 minus something is to be 3. So this is 2, so I get a clue from here. Then 2 minus 0, 2, that is correct. Then 3 plus 1 is 4. Okay, now something needs to be minus, something minus 2 should be 4, so that means 6. And then something 5 plus something should be 6, so that is 1. So 1 plus 0 should be 1. So this is done. Okay, so this is how we do think aloud protocol. So that means we try to speak loud our thought processes, how we navigate, how we solve this particular puzzle, and later whatever I have speak, this can be converted into textual information as transcripts, and someone can code that information and identify like how I have solved this particular puzzle. And in case this puzzle was very difficult, then probably there could be issues that could have been identified as a major issue with this particular puzzle. So here's an example of transcript. So here's an example of interview transcript. Now what happened when you uh, convert all the verbal information, the vocal data, audio tape data into textual information, you may have both important as well as unimportant information. Now the very first task you do as a part of transcript analysis process is you try to highlight or try to capture those informations which are of importance to you. So this is done generally by usability experts when you try to evaluate a particular system using think aloud protocol. So what a usability expert try to identify is try to see where a particular user faces issue in terms of navigation or in terms of interacting with certain controls. Okay, so like that, a usability expert identifies key points from the transcripts which can be later converted into codes. So this is basically the coding process. So we have now these extracted, so these are the actual transcripts, and then we have the extracted important findings. So these are like the findings. These findings define the problems more descriptively. This is more qualitative in nature. Now we need to code them. Now coding means we try to assign a simple label to define this particular issue. Okay. So the very first label, which comprise of few words or few sentence, not few sentences, few words, that is called open coding. For example, here a transcript can say like, if I am using that booking app, okay, so I could not find, so this can be the transcripts outcome. So the extracted transcript can be like, I could not find the problem, I could not find the search button, I could not find the controls, okay, I got it, like that. So those can be importance finding. Now a open code for that finding can be unable to find control. Okay, so this means here control or search button. So now this particular thing describe a level for this particular usability context. Now when we have multiple of such open codes, okay, from an interview, then the next task that the coding experts, so those again needs to be hired for a coding process, they try to efficientize the open codes and try to understand the central groups that defines the key problem areas. So probably if you see unable to find control, unable to find search button, or unable to find pay information, that means Excel code can be a label which is a combined characteristics of all these open codes. So probably Excel codes can be difficulty in recognizing feature. Okay. Okay, so these are the issues, the key issues that are identified by clubbing together multiple open codes. Now selective codes means a next level of codes where you combine multiple Excel codes into specific groups of your interest. So you may have multiple Excel codes. Okay, so these are Excel codes, Excel code, Excel code. But your objective or your design objective only lies with few selected Excel codes, and you try to group them as or with a new label which is of key importance to you. In this particular process, you may reject or not consider few Excel codes, or you may group the Excel codes in a different way. For example, this particular group having difficulties with navigation, difficulties with recognition, may be uh, poor legibility of information. Now your objective is to improve the legibility of information. So that's how you group multiple Excel codes into selective codes. Okay. So that's the entire coding process. So the coding process involves identifying key concepts or constructs from the interview transcripts, then assign labels with hierarchy. So the selective code is the label with highest hierarchy. Then under a selective code you will have multiple axial codes. This is selective code, axial code. Then under each axial code you will have multiple open codes. However, in selective code you may choose not to consider certain axial codes if it is not of interest to your particular project. Okay. Okay, now another technique is card sorting. So card sorting is a technique which is often used by designers. So this is again similar to coding. Here we again ethnicize key concepts into useful categories. So this is done for websites. So we always try to understand how the users try to consider information in a particular information architecture. So you might have seen in websites that there are different way how informations are categorized or distributed under various tabs in a website. So this is basically the overall information architecture. Now, if this information architecture or the information distribution is what is not a match with the user's mental model, then often user may find difficulty in navigating through your website or your application, and that may be catastrophic for your user interface. So generally for that, we try to understand how user is going to organize the categories or subcategories into broad uh, labels. Okay. So in a card sorting process, we write name. Okay, we write name for each subcategories, and then we also provide small description what they mean, and then we shuffle all these and ask the user to uh, to ethnicize or to break them into individual groups. Now here a user try to group all these individual cards into certain key chunks or key categories. Okay. Now sometimes these labels are provided by the designer. That means we have a fixed menu system, and we just try to understand how the user wants to see these subtopics under these categories. So where he need to, or user wants to position the information. However, there are also open-ended card sorting processes where the users are given full freedom to define their own levels after they come up with or define certain groups, and then the websites are developed according to that. Okay? So this is to match the mental model of the user on the navigational requirements, on the information requirement, with the conceptual model of the design. Okay. Now, very similar technique which is used for evaluating a particular hierarchy of information. So this is called tree testing, and this is often followed by card sorting. So what happened in a card sorting? A user or a group of users, they affinitize certain items or certain labels under a bigger label. So these are sub labels, then you have a key labels. So you can see there are two labels here. One is furniture, so which comprise of beds, wardrobes, bookcases. So probably it's a website where you can identify various furnitures. Then there are armchairs. Then under armchair there are chairs, armchairs, sofas. Now this is the card sorting, but later a designer needs to include these under certain higher categories. So for this particular website, so the website that a designer has developed have a hierarchy like home. Then you have categories. Under categories there is the furniture group that is defined from card sorting. Then you have the armchair group, which is also defined. Now here we are testing different hierarchies for their ease of navigation and for their ease of access. Okay, so what we do here, we give the user a certain task to identify a particular sub level, and we try to check if the user is able to identify that particular subtopic or sub level. Okay, so we do competitive tree testing, which is a testing of level versus location. So testing of level means whether a particular level, okay, should move up or down, or you need to fall under under another category. Okay, so moving levels from one place to another place needs comparison of two different trees. Okay, okay. Now these are two different trees. One has two branches, one have three branches. Now if we move levels, okay, if we shift new levels, if we create new levels, that means we need to compare which where navigation is easy. So we require a tree testing between two trees, okay, two such hierarchical trees. However, in order to check locations of a particular sub level, we need not to compare between two trees. Instead, for example, we have furniture, then we have armchair. Now, if we need to check the location of sofa, whether it should go to furniture or armchair, we do not have to compare two different trees, because this is within the same tree, and we can identify the best possible location of this particular sub level by getting information from the number of user clicks that happen for searching for this particular item. For example, if multiple users click a furniture first to identify sofa, and then later they arrive at sofa, that means the position of sofa is not correctly done. However, if they directly can reach this sofa position, sofa sub level, without going to furniture, that means this is the correct position. So that's how we do competitive tree testing, where we analyze the positions of levels and movements of particular locations within the same subtree. Okay, okay. So far we have understood various user research methods. So these are all various user study methods we discussed about. So we first discussed about contextual inquiry, then we discussed about interviews. Then interviews have structured, unstructured, semi-structured. Then we have critical incident technique. Then we have task analysis. Then walkthroughs. Walkthroughs also have, you have pluralistic walkthroughs, cognitive walkthroughs. Then we have think aloud protocol, and then we have card sorting and tree methods. So like that, there are various techniques that have various importance, and those are used for user study. They're used as user study for different contexts. Now you need to understand when to choose which particular method. Okay, so far this is common to all the user study techniques, that a user study technique or a user study can be, break down into attitudinal and behavioral, that we already discussed. Attitudinal means something that is based upon your recall or based on your memory. Behavioral is something what you saw or what you observe, in life, in real time. Then the nature of the information that you are looking for can be qualitative or quantitative. Okay? And also there are context based on which you try to choose which particular method you will be using. So basically it's a three-dimensional framework. You consider whether you are looking for attitudinal data or you are looking for behavioral data. That means whether you are looking for actual incident, you want to get into details by observing a particular action, or whether is it possible to collect those information, or is a behavioral study is a better way of, recognizing the problem and actually seeing the scenario by going in a field study. Similarly, whether you will be choosing a qualitative technique, that means the output will be a qualitative data or quantitative data. Depending upon that also you choose your study method, your user study method. Then context of use. So where, what is the particular thing you try to understand? For example, you try to understand what people do. That means this is something related to activities. So you may perform task analysis, okay, or you may do contextual inquiry. Okay, how and how to fix. Now, how, why, and how to fix is more no, cognitive. So if you want to inquire about how people fix that particular problem, how and why they fix, probably you may need to collect information from attitudinal study. That can be interview, or you can use think aloud protocol or cognitive walkthrough. You also look for how many, how much. If it is how many, how much, that means it is quantitative data. So quantitative techniques like questionnaire, so technique can be used to collect this information. And what people say, what people say is more like attitudinal information. So this is like opinion of people. So the techniques can be interview, focus group, etc. So focus group give you a group uh, information, a viewpoint of a group, and interviews will give you individual viewpoints. And depending upon your requirement, you need to select which particular user study type you will be using for your inquiry. Okay, so I think this is clear. If you have any doubt, please feel free to ask. Okay. Okay, so finally, I'll ask you three questions, like based on your understanding. So I want to check your understanding about the requirements about particular user study methods. This is not contextual inquiry method, sorry. This should be which user study method you will be using. So you need to analyze the usability issues of a system. So my question is, which usability study method you will be using? Now this is a scenario of a crane, which is an industrial crane, in-house crane, which is used to lift uh, heavy tools or equipments which are not possible by human effort. And you try to understand the usability or the interactions of the interface of this particular system. So the question is like, which user study method you will be using. Yes. Okay, so okay, correct. So we'll be doing here, one is contextual inquiry. Probably we'll get permission to see how the user perform. Okay, that is one way. The another way, if we get to know that person very well, then probably you may ask for task analysis. That means for task analysis we need to understand the goals, the various capabilities of this particular system, and then only we can give particular goal to check this particular system. Okay. Okay, next, which okay, again, which user study method you will be using to understand the issue in a cataract surgery procedure. Okay, see here, depending upon the scenario, you cannot do here a interview, or you cannot do unstructured interview during a live procedure. Okay, so that means you need to choose your user study method strategically so that you do not disturb the particular clinical procedure, and also you get to know about the particular issue in the cataract surgery procedure. Okay, so very first thing can be shadowing. Shadowing is very much similar to contextual inquiry, but you do not ask anything, you just observe the scenario as a silent observer, and you follow people or the stakeholders inside the scenario without disturbing their activities. But you do not ask any questions to anyone. You do not interact physically. You just be there like a silent observer and try to watch and try to see various behavior, various activities of people, and try to see if the doctor here faces any issues, if there are issues they face during the procedure, so how the two people interact, is it difficult to interact. So all these assumptions you make initially using this contextual inquiry technique called shadowing. Now next, what you do, you then meet these people individually and do a interview, and then you use critical incident technique to understand what was the particular issue you faced, or what was the procedure, why you both have to interact. So all those information you first collect individually, then you do a focus group if required, where you include multiple stakeholders including a patient, a doctor, a nurse, and then you try to understand what are the issues they face, and if there are common understanding, then you can conclude, you can arrive at a conclusive remark on particular issues. Okay, usability issues. Okay, so that's it. This is again another, which user study method you will use. So you need to understand the ill practices in a government system. So imagine you need to go inside a hospital setting and then you try to understand what are the ill practices there. Now imagine if this is a place which is unknown to you and the language also is alien to you, probably you will not find people cooperating to you, for communication, for communicating important factors or important issues in that system. Most of the time you will observe only issues when things goes wrong. If someone faces certain issues, then only you will be able to recognize, otherwise you will you'll be having difficulties. So in order to understand the ill practices of such a government system, shadowing is one thing. You can also do contextual inquiry and try to see, but it will be a long, like time taking procedure. So that critical incident or that particular breakdown point where you see a ill practice will may take time. So there is no guarantee like when that particular day come. So this is more like an exploratory study technique. So you will be visiting the facility for over 1 month, 2 month, then you will probably able to understand all your practices. Another technique can be just move higher in the hierarchy and try to gather information from different stakeholders individually. So you interview each of them and try to understand ill practices. But this is not possible if you directly communicate to person who are involved in ill practices. So better you start from a higher authority, and if that is not also successful, then you identify other stakeholders which are in close collaboration or in close alliance with the government system, and then try to gather information from them. Sometimes interviewing patient also interview will also help, because they from their perspective they may give you information about the practices that creates problem to the patients. Okay. So these are different users study techniques, and this is how you can use various user study techniques depending upon whether you require behavioral or attitudinal data, or whether you need qualitative or quantitative data, or whether you need uh, information on specific context, that is whether you need data on how, or whether you need information about what, or which is more quantitative in nature. Okay. Okay, that's it. So thank you for coming to today's lecture. So that's the end of today's session. So the next class will be again next Saturday, which will be 14th of March. Okay, so please be present in the next class. So if you have any query, please feel free to ask. Thank you.